Welcome to the deep dive. We're constantly flooded with information these days, articles, guides, research papers. It's a lot. How do you actually get to the important stuff quickly?
Exactly. That's what we try to do here. Cut through the noise.
So today, we're diving into a guide for the IELTS writing exam. Now, even if you're not taking the test, stick around. We're pulling out tips and strategies that honestly apply to making any English writing clearer and, well, more persuasive.
Yeah, this is about practical wisdom.
Yeah.
And the specific guide we're looking at is the IELTS Writing Guide, the January 2025 version, so it's pretty current.
Right?
And the first thing that jumps out, which is kind of interesting for a writing guide, is that it actually kicks off by talking about the IELTS speaking test.
Yeah, I saw that. My first thought was, wait, speaking in a writing guide. But then it made sense, actually.
It does, right, because the guide immediately tackles this common idea that the speaking test is somehow the easy one.
Which it definitely isn't, according to this source. It makes a really strong point that all four sections are designed to be equally difficult. Maybe one feels easier for you personally, depending on your skills, but the challenge level is meant to be the same across the board.
Spot on. It's about setting expectations correctly from the start. So the guide outlines the speaking test structure. It's about 10 to 16 minutes long, and the exact time depends on how much you say, basically.
Okay.
And it's got three parts. Part 1 is 4 to 6 minutes, just short questions about you, everyday stuff. Part 2 is 3-4 minutes, where you give a little 2-minute talk on a topic they give you, usually something from your experience.
Right, the long term.
Exactly. And then Part 3 is another 4-6 minutes of follow-up questions based on what you talked about in Part 2.
And the guide mentions the setup. It's just you and one examiner. But here's a detail I found interesting. The examiner might be looking down at their notes a lot because the scoring is, well, complex.
Yeah, that can be a bit off-putting if you're not expecting it. But the guide also stresses that the whole thing is recorded.
Which sounds stressful, but is it actually a good thing?
It's definitely a good thing for the candidate, yeah. It's there as evidence if you ever need to question your score later. It's a kind of safety net.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the advice it gives for the speaking test, it's pure gold, and honestly, it applies just as much to writing. Things like listen carefully, follow the instructions exactly, be polite, speak clearly.
And only answer what they ask, right? Don't go off on tangents.
Precisely. And they even give you a specific phrase for if you don't understand. Sorry, please, could you repeat the question? Just calm, polite, no need to panic.
That politeness and clarity theme seems really central.
It is, and it's a great bridge to the next section, which is all about scoring and how you can strategically approach it. This applies across the board, but they frame it initially through the speaking criteria.
Right, so the four criteria: coherence and cohesion, basically doesn't flow logically. Then lexical resource, your vocabulary. Grammatical range and accuracy, self-explanatory. And task achievement, did you answer the question properly?
Yep. But here's a really interesting scoring detail from the guide. Your final score isn't just a straight average of all four. It's actually an average based on 3 of them, each worth 25%. That's a subtle but important distinction.
Huh. And what about improving your score? The guide had something interesting to say about that too, didn't it? About higher scores being harder to reach.
It did. It points out that generally moving up half a band, say from a 7 to a 7.5, is significantly harder than going from like a 6 to a 6.5. The gaps get wider, effectively.
So the effort needed increases disproportionately.
Exactly. Which leads to a key strategy the guide highlights. If you want to boost your overall score efficiently, you should really focus your energy on the specific writing criteria where you struggle the most. Don't just practice randomly. Target your weaknesses.
Targeted practice. That feels like a good lead-in to the core message about writing preparation itself. The guide is incredibly direct here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It basically shouts, there is no substitute for writing practice, like bold letters.
Yeah. It really pushes back against the idea that just reading more or listening more or doing isolated grammar exercises will somehow automatically make you a better writer. The guide says, point blank, it won't.
You have to actually do the writing. And it notes that many people just don't get enough chances to write proper essays regularly in English. So they often need to put in, significantly more dedicated writing time.
Makes sense. You can't learn to swim by reading about swimming.
Precisely. And it's not just any practice. It needs to be disciplined practice, under time pressure, just like the real test. Reviewing model essays from good sources is also really valuable.
And feedback. That seemed critical in the guide.
Hugely critical.
Yeah.
Especially if you're aiming high, like 6.5 or above. The guide says just avoiding mistakes isn't enough at that level. You need feedback that tells you what to start doing, what to do better, what to do more of. It's about positive improvement, not just error correction.
Moving from defense to offense, almost.
That's a great way to put it. And again, it links back, mentioning that vocab and grammar make up 50% of the speaking score, showing how fundamental these are across all skills.
Okay, so practice is king. What about the building blocks? The guide gets into specifics with checklists, right? Grammar and vocabulary areas to focus on?
It does. It suggests setting up like a dedicated Word doc for notes and exercises, a sort of personal writing lab.
I like that. And the grammar list is quite comprehensive. Tenses, obviously, but also modal verbs, your coulds and shoulds, conditionals, different types of clauses, sentence structures.
Yeah, simple, compound, complex sentences, plus conjunctions, linking words, and even things like the passive voice and causatives for that more formal academic tone.
And vocabulary.
Focus on higher level words generally, but also specifically things like phrasal verbs, common phrases, and idioms, and using adjectives and adverbs effectively to add detail and nuance. It's all about demonstrating that range.
So once you've got those foundations, the guide offers some general writing tips. These seem pretty universal. First one, analyze the question really carefully. Don't just glance at it.
Absolutely. Understand exactly what's being asked. And then crucially, make an outline before you start writing. Don't just wing it.
Good advice for any writing task, really. And then the strict rules. No informal language, no slang, and specifically, no contractions.
Right. So in your essay, it has to be we are, not we're.
Yeah.
That's a classic IELTS rule. And always paraphrase the question in your introduction. Don't just copy it word for word.
Time management is another big one. How does the guide break that down?
Clear guidelines. Aim for 20 minutes for essay 1 and 40 minutes for essay 2. And that time includes checking your work.
Ah, the checking time is built in. How much time for checking?
It recommends dedicating about 20% of your time just for checking and improving. So maybe 4 minutes for essay 1, 8 minutes for essay 2, something like that.
And when checking, you're looking for more than just typos.
Definitely. Spelling and punctuation matter, of course, especially under pressure. But strategically, you should also look for ways to upgrade your writing. Maybe swap a simple verb for a more advanced one, or add a well-placed adjective or adverb.
The guide also suggests trying essay 2 first during practice.
Yeah, just as an experiment. Some people find it better to tackle the bigger essay while they're freshest. Yeah. Worth trying to see what works for you. And a final reminder. The test is about your English writing skills, not about how much you already know about, say, environmental policy or whatever the topic is.
Right, focus on the language. Okay, let's dig into Essay 1, Academic Task 1. This is often about describing charts or graphs, right?
Usually, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or diagrams, maps, processes. The key thing is the word count. 3 to 4 paragraphs, aiming for 150 to 180 words.
And the guide specifically warns about going over 180.
It does. It says it usually just leads to more mistakes and doesn't gain you any points. Conciseness is really valued here. Precision.
And the timing for this one.
Aim for about 16 minutes of writing, leaving 4 minutes for those corrections and improvements we talked about.
Style-wise.
Strictly impersonal academic. Use the passive voice. And absolutely no personal opinions or I think in the conclusion for task 1.
Yeah.
You're just reporting the data.
So what should you focus on? The guide mentioned moving beyond just listing numbers.
Yes, that's crucial for higher scores. Don't just say the number was X in year Y. Describe the changes, the trends, the comparisons over time. Use appropriate tenses to show how things develop. Yeah. It's about interpretation of the data, not just stating facts.
And there was an interesting point about sentence structure.
Ah, yes. Complex structures are good. They show grammatical range. But the guide warns against overly complicated sentences. Very long sentences, like over 30 words, can actually hurt your score if they make your meaning unclear.
So, complex but clear. That's the goal.
Exactly.
What about a suggested structure for Essay 1?
The guide offers a pretty standard effective structure. Paragraph 1. Introduction, paraphrase the question, give a very brief overview or main trend, maybe 20, 30 words. Paragraphs 2 and 3 are your body paragraphs. This is where you go into detail, comparisons, key features, significant data points, changes over time, about 50, 60 words each.
Grouping the information logically.
Right. And then paragraph 4 is a very short conclusion, maybe just 10, 15 words, summarizing the main point or trend again, but without opinion.
Seems straightforward enough. What about specific language tips for scoring higher on task 1?
Okay, lots here. Master your tenses, simple, continuous, perfect. Perfect, continuous to accurately describe timing. Aim for at least 3 complex sentence structures. Build your vocabulary for describing change.
Like increase, decrease.
Yes, but more varied words. Climb, rocket, soar for increases. Plummet, plunge, dip for decreases. Maintained, stabilized, leveled off for no change. And use adverbs to describe how the change happened. Gradually, sharply, steadily, dramatically.
So adding descriptive power. What else?
Use more sophisticated verbs. Avoid basics like do, make, looks where possible.
Yep.
Employ linking words and conjunctions effectively to connect ideas smoothly. Things like in addition, furthermore, but also higher level ones like although, despite, thus, in contrast.
And the passive voice.
Use at least one passive sentence construction. It adds to the formal, objective tone needed for task 1. And remember to focus on the main trends, the big picture, rather than every tiny fluctuation in the data.
The guide also gives examples for things like percentages, right?
Yeah, very practical stuff, like saying the number of users dropped by 26% or 14% of the users. It also lists helpful sentence starters or connectors for comparing, on the one hand, on the other hand, organizing, as a result, therefore, conceding points, although, however, and showing similarity, likewise. It's a really useful toolkit.
Okay, that covers task 1 thoroughly. Let's move on to the big one. Essay 2, writing task 2. This is the longer essay, more opinion-based sometimes.
Often, yes. Or discussing problems and solutions, advantages and disadvantages. It's 4 or 5 paragraphs aiming for 250, 300 words. And again, that warning, going much over 300, often just introduces errors.
Be concise, be impactful.
Option 2 is a bit more complex, good for discuss both views type questions. You introduce the topic, have a paragraph for one side, maybe your main view, a paragraph for the counter-argument or the other side, then potentially a paragraph explain why your view is stronger or reconciling the points, and then a final conclusion.
So you show you understand complexity.
Exactly. It allows for a more balanced discussion before you state your final position.
And linguistically, what does Essay 2 demand? Is it a step up from Essay 1?
Definitely a step up. You still need relevant tenses and good vocab, but now the target is 5 or more complex sentence structures.
5 plus, okay.
Good use of adverbs and adjectives, at least one passive sentence again. Use modal verbs, could, would, should, to discuss possibilities or recommendations, maybe conditionals if appropriate. And a wide range of linkers and conjunctions is really important here to build a sophisticated argument.
Connecting ideas skillfully.
Precisely. And the guide stresses again, make sure you address all parts of the question. If it asks for problems and solutions, you need to cover both adequately.
And the topics for Essay 2 can be quite broad.
Very broad. The guide mentions common areas like education, work, environment, technology, health. You need to be ready to write coherently about a range of general interest subjects, using your language skills as the focus.
So the guide lays out all these strategies, structures, language points.
Yeah.
But it doesn't claim to be the only resource you need, does it?
Not at all. It very clearly positions itself as a starting point, or maybe a framework. It's packed with references to other places you can go for more help.
Like what kind of resources?
All sorts, really. It points towards YouTube channels that offer tips and analyze sample essays, dedicated websites with practice exercises and more advice, even mobile apps for studying vocabulary or grammar on the go.
And podcasts, too, it mentioned.
Yep, even podcasts specifically for IELTS writing. The message is clear. Use this guide to understand the requirements and strategies, but then use these other tools for the ongoing practice and refinement that's essential.
It really comes back to that core message of practice, doesn't it?
It really does.
So wrapping this up, thinking about everything we've pulled from this guide. Whether you, the listener, are facing IELTS or just want to write better emails or reports in English, the big takeaway seems to be it takes deliberate practice, smart planning, and being open to feedback.
Absolutely. Getting really good isn't just about cutting out mistakes. It's about actively using those complex structures, finding the precise words, and building arguments that are genuinely compelling. It's moving beyond